The great hall of the Galactic Council was silent. Its towering arches seemed to press down on Ambassador Myri as she stood alone at the polished stone podium. The air smelled of ozone and something faintly floral, a scent from a world she had never seen. Her simple gray suit felt out of place among the robes and shimmering bioluminescent garments of the other delegates. On her datapad, a single word glowed: Soul. The representative of the Vel was speaking. His name was Kale. His skin had the texture of smoothed granite, and his voice sounded like stones grinding gently together. He was considered a moderate, a friend to humanity during their brief 50-year membership. Now, he would not meet Myri's eyes. The incident at the Gamma Corvi relay station is not in dispute, Kale stated, his words amplified for the 12 assembled species. A hologram flickered to life above him, showing the charred wreckage of a Vel courier ship. A human vessel, the Odyssey, misinterpreted a standard data burst as a hostile act. In their emotional distress over a prior loss, they opened fire. In the observer gallery, Myri's aide, June, clenched his fists under the table. He had been on the Odyssey. He remembered the panic, the grief. They had just received word that the colony ship Pioneer had vanished into a spatial anomaly, with 10,000 souls aboard. The Odyssey's crew was mourning, their judgment clouded by a loss the Vel, who processed death with serene detachment, could not comprehend. The Vel courier's sudden transmission, a simple automated scan, had been misread by a jumpy ensign as a weapon lock. It was a tragedy of errors. "This is not an isolated event," said the Cillian delegate, a willowy being with large, dark eyes. "Humanity's technological progression is alarmingly rapid and unstructured. Their social models are unstable, driven by passions we find difficult to predict. For the safety and stability of the Council, we must consider the Soul Directive." The Soul Directive, polite term for exile, for abandonment. Myri found her voice. It was softer than she intended, so she straightened her back. "Honored Council, the loss of the Pioneer was a trauma for my people. Our reaction at Gamma Corvi was a mistake, a terrible mistake born of grief, not malice. We have offered reparations. We have submitted to all inquiries, to sever us from the shared knowledge, the trade routes, the mutual defense pacts. It is a punishment that will cost billions of lives on Earth. It will not make the galaxy safer. It will only create a desperate, isolated corner of it." She looked at Kale, pleading silently. He had visited Earth. He had tasted human food, listened to their music. He had called their passion vibrant. Kale's stony face was unreadable. "Ambassador Myri, humanity's strength is also its danger. You feel too deeply, too quickly. You innovate without understanding the consequences. You are a fire, and a fire must be contained, lest it burn a forest you did not mean to ignite. For stability, you must walk alone. Perhaps in isolation you will learn control." The vote was called. One by one, lights illuminated on the circular table. Blue for affirmation of the directive. Red for denial. Myri watched as blue after blue flickered on. The Cillian, the TKRR, the aquatic laner. Her heart sank with each one. She glanced at June. His face was pale, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Kale's turn came. The Vel delegate paused, his heavy-lidded eyes finally settling on Myri. There was something there, not malice, but a profound, regretful certainty. He believed this was mercy. He believed isolation would cure humanity of its humanity. His light glowed blue. The vote was unanimous. The effect was immediate. On Myri's datapad, the word soul winked out. The soft hum of the Council's data stream in her implant vanished, replaced by a hollow silence. The translation frequencies in her earpiece went dead. The friendly green lights on her console, indicating open communication with Earth, turned a flat, empty gray. They were now ghosts in the room, cut off from the conversation of the galaxy. "The Soul Directive is enacted," a synthetic voice announced. "Humanity is hereby placed outside the protective framework of the Galactic Council. All shared technologies are deactivated. All transit lanes are closed. May you find your own path." The other delegates rose, already discussing other matters. Humanity was a concluded agenda item. Myri stood frozen at the podium, the weight of her world on her shoulders. June appeared at her side, his hand gently on her elbow. "Ambassador," he said softly, "we must go." They walked through the grand corridors, past beings who now looked through them as if they were not there. The journey to their docking berth was a silent march through a suddenly foreign place. They boarded their small, elegant diplomatic shuttle, a ship that now felt like a coffin. Only when the airlock sealed and the shuttle detached, floating freely in the silent dark, did Myri move. She walked to the large viewport, staring at the glittering spires of the council station. A jewel of cooperation from which they were now forever excluded. June stood behind her, waiting for orders, for a breakdown, for something. A single tear traced a path down Myri's cheek. But her eyes, reflecting the starlight, held no surrender. They burned with a cold, clear fire. "They think loneliness will break us, June," she whispered, her voice like steel in the quiet. "They have no idea what it will forge." She turned to him, the tear dry. "Set course for home. Maximum speed. We have work to do." The great loneliness began not with a shout, but with a silent, terrifying blink. Across Earth and its fledgling colonies, every piece of technology gifted or traded by the Galactic Council simply stopped. Starship navigation grids filled with static. Medical scanners that could cure 100 alien diseases became inert boxes. The data streams, full of a galaxy's knowledge, went dark. The shock was followed by panic, and the panic by a deep, cold despair. Global economies tied to alien alloys and zero-gravity manufacturing collapsed like paper in rain. On Earth, cities that had reached for the stars now looked inward, broken and hungry. But humans, as they always had, began to pick up the pieces. The old nations, after years of bitter struggle, dissolved into a single grim entity, the Terran Reclamation Project. Its symbol was a fist holding a broken chain. Its mantra, etched on every wall and screen, was, "Never again." The story of survival was written in two places, far from Earth on Mars. In the vast, dusty shipyards of the Hellas Basin, an engineer named Day worked until his hands bled. His world was one of noise and fire. Before the abandonment, he had been a junior technician, learning to maintain graceful council-supplied drives. Now, he was piecing together monstrous engines from old theories, human ingenuity, and sheer stubborn will. The ship he worked on was called the Unyielding. Its skeleton was crude, forged from Martian iron and asteroid steel. It was ugly, but it was theirs. "The problem isn't the math," Day yelled over the scream of a plasma torch to his team lead. "It's the containment. Our materials can't handle the stress of a sustained warp field. We either go nowhere or we turn into a cloud of atoms." The answer did not come from a council database. It came from a forgotten research paper by a physicist named Park, who had theorized about quantum singularities, tiny artificial black holes. Her work had been called "too dangerous and unstable." Now, those words sounded like a starting point. Day and his team began to build what they called the Azura Core. It was a prison for a tiny piece of a dead star. It was volatile. It was terrifying. When they tested a small-scale prototype, it didn't hum like a council engine. It roared, and a flame of unnatural, amber-red plasma burned at its heart. It worked. Meanwhile, on the icy moon of Europa, a woman named Hannah fought a different battle. Inside a habitat dome under 5 kilometers of ice, her world was one of silence and delicate, terrible balance. She was a biologist. Her task was not to build engines, but to keep people alive inside them for years. The Council's life support systems had been perfect closed loops. Ours were failing. Algae crops died. Air filters clogged. "We are trying to copy a symphony by banging on rocks," she told her small team, her breath fogging in the cold lab air. "Their biology was engineered over millennia. Ours is a wild, messy accident." Her breakthrough came from the ice itself. Drilling deep, they found not just microbes, but a vast, slow ecosystem of extremophile bacteria. These creatures did not just survive in the dark and cold. They thrived, recycling minerals and gases in impossibly efficient ways. Hannah didn't try to copy the council. She began to harness the wildness. She engineered a new system, grafting this tough, ancient Europa biology into the life support matrices. It was not elegant. It was a snarling, living thing in the walls of a starship. But it recycled air and water with a brutal, relentless efficiency. It would keep a crew alive. Years bled into decades. The silent century, people called it. There were no messages from the stars, only the hard silence of exile. Children on Earth grew up hearing stories of a galaxy that had rejected them. The mood shifted from despair to a hard, focused anger. Shipyards across the asteroid belt glowed with the forge fire of construction. Every bolt turned, every wire welded, was an act of defiance. One day, a message came to both Day on Mars and Hannah on Europa. It was a summons, encrypted and urgent, from the Central Command on Earth. The sender was listed simply as Architect. They traveled to a secure, barren rock in the outer system. In a stark room, they met the architect. It was Myri. The young ambassador was gone, replaced by a woman of stone and sharp edges, her hair white, her eyes holding the same cold fire Day saw in his Azura core test burns. She showed them a hidden ship, the first of its kind, built in the dark between asteroids. It was all sharp angles and armored plates, with the snarling amber heart of an Azura core at its center and Hannah's wild, living ecosystem in its veins. This, Myri said, her voice quiet but filling the room, is the answer to their silence. Not a plea, not a request to rejoin. They defined us by our grief. They called our heart a weakness. She placed a hand on the cold hull. So we will build a fleet with a heart of fire, and we will show them that a heart, when forged in the dark, can burn brighter than any of their cold, logical stars. 100 years of silence. On Pluto's frozen moon, Charon, a human listening post clung to the ice. It was not much. A few domes, a deep space sensor array pointed at the endless dark, and a crew of 5 who served 6-month rotations in the cold and the quiet. Its official name was Outpost Persephone. The crew called it the Ghost Station. Its purpose was simple: watch, listen, and report anything that came from the direction of the old council space. For a century, the reports had been the same. Nothing. Static. The silent proof of their exile. Lieutenant Min was on the final week of his rotation. He was a quiet man who liked the silence. He had a small garden of hydroponic lettuce he tended, and he spent his off hours reading old paper books about Earth's oceans, which he had never seen. His job was to monitor the long-range gravimetric sensors. It was dull work. Ripples in spacetime were rare, and usually just background noise from dying stars far, far away. So when the alert chimed, a soft ping in the quiet control room, Min almost dismissed it as another ghost echo. He sipped his coffee and looked at the screen. A ripple, then another. Pattern. It was a signal, but not on any frequency they monitored. It was buried in the subspace distortion itself, like a scream etched into the fabric of space. "Hey!" Min called over to the comms officer, a woman named Ga. "I'm getting structured gravimetric pulses from Sector Theta 7, Old Vel border space."
Ja, frowned.
"No comms traffic on any band. Clean as a vacuum." "This isn't comms," Min said, his fingers flying over the console. It's like the shockwave from an explosion, but it's repeating. A pattern." He ran a decoding algorithm, something built to recognize distress calls in any form. The computer chugged, processing the strange, pained ripples in space. A text script spilled onto his screen. It was fragmented, corrupted. He read it aloud, his voice flat in the quiet room. "Primary defense grid fallen. Gravian swarm. Breakthrough at the Lipso Pass, worlds burning. We cannot hold. We cannot any council vessel, any soul who hears, help us. The hive consumes all. KYTH's world is lost. Vel Prime is next. By the stones of our ancestors we beg." The message repeated twice more, then dissolved back into noise. The control room was silent, the only sound the hum of the life support. The other 3 crew members had gathered, their faces pale on the screens of their stations. Gravian, Ga whispered. The name was a shadow from old council briefings. A devouring species. A locust swarm of the stars. The council's ancient, shared enemy. Min brought up the star charts. Sector Theta 7. The Vel frontier. The signal was old, carried by the slow ripples of distorted space. By the time it had reached their frozen outpost, traveling for months, maybe a year, whatever was happening there was likely already over. Kale's world. The world of the stoic, stone-skinned people who had voted to abandon them. It was probably already dead. Consumed. A hot, bitter satisfaction rose in Min's chest. He let it sit there for a moment. They had cast humanity out into the cold. Let them feel the cold of extinction. What are the protocols? One of the other crew asked. The protocols were clear. Any contact, any signal from council space, was to be recorded and relayed immediately to Earth Command. It was a relic rule from a time when they might have hoped for a recall and apology. Min looked at the fragmented words on his screen. Worlds burning. We cannot hold. We beg. He thought of Kale's voice, like grinding stones. For stability, you must walk alone. He opened a channel to Earth. The tight beam laser comms would take hours to carry his message home. He attached the raw data and the decoded text. Then he sat back. His job was done. But the silence in the room felt different now. It wasn't the quiet of emptiness. It was the quiet after a distant scream has faded. Ga was looking at him. Do you think Command will do anything? She asked. Min thought of the stories. The great loneliness. The decades of hunger and struggle. The ships they had built in secret with their dangerous hearts of fire. He thought of the hate that had fueled so much of it. No, he said finally. His voice sounded tired, even to himself. Why would we? They made their choice. They wanted us gone. Now they get to be gone too. He turned back to his console, but he didn't look at the star charts. He looked at the image on his personal screen, a picture of Earth's blue ocean, taken from a century past. He thought about fire in the dark, and about screams lost in the void. The bitter satisfaction was gone, replaced by something heavier and much colder. He had delivered the message. The choice was now someone else's. He hoped, for his own soul's sake, that they would choose to let the silence continue. But a small, fearful part of him wondered what a century of loneliness had truly built out there in the dark shipyards. And if it had built something that could hear a scream, even from an enemy, and simply turn away. The command center was buried deep beneath the Himalayas, a cavern of cool rock and glowing screens. The air hummed with a quiet tension. In the center of the room, standing before a holographic star map, was Myri. A century of leadership had not bowed her. It had sharpened her into a blade. The white streak in her hair was now a full mantle of silver, but her eyes, fixed on the flickering distress signal from Sharon, held the same fire around her, the Terran Reclamation Council argued. Their voices echoed in the cavern. This is not our fight. Admiral Park, head of the fledgling Space Force, slammed a fist on the table. For 100 years, they left us to die in the dark. Let the Gravian have them. It is cosmic justice. A murmur of agreement came from many in the room. The anger was old, but it had been kept warm by the constant struggle to survive. Myri did not speak. She let the anger wash around her. Her gaze was on the translated text floating in the air. Vel Prime is next. We beg. A younger voice cut through the noise. It was June. His hair was gray at the temples now, and his face carried the weight of a lifetime spent preparing for a war he hoped would never come. He had been the strategist at the council, then the chief architect of fleet tactics. He stood calmly. Admiral, June said, his voice even. What is the primary purpose of the Azura fleet? To defend Earth, Park snapped. From what? The council abandoned us. They are no threat. The Gravian are on the other side of their space. The fleet was never just a shield. June stepped closer to the hologram, pointing at the Vel homeworld. It was a statement. It was built to prove that never again meant something. If we hear a plea for help, even from them, and we turn away, what does that make us? Are we just a bitter, lonely rock, hiding in the dark? The room fell silent. Park looked away, his jaw tight. Myri finally moved. She walked to the center of the room, her steps slow and deliberate. All eyes followed her. They believed our emotion was a flaw, she said, her voice low but clear. Kale told me we were a fire that needed to be contained, that we must learn control through isolation. She looked at each of them. He was wrong. We did not learn control. We learned focus. We did not put out our fire. We forged it into a new kind of steel. She turned to the hologram, to the desperate signal. If we do not go, we become the very thing they accused us of, a danger defined by selfishness and rage. But if we go, we show them the truth. We show them that humanity's heart is not a weakness to be cut out. It is our engine. It is our weapon. We will not go for the council. We will go for us, to prove to ourselves what a century of loneliness has forged. She turned to June. Can the fleet make the journey? June nodded. The Azura cores are unstable over such a distance. We will lose ships, but the 1,000 are ready. They wait for the order. Myri looked at Admiral Park. The old soldier met her gaze, and after a long moment, gave a single stiff nod. Then give the order, Myri said. The command flashed from the mountain. Across the solar system, in the hidden shipyards of the asteroid belt, the docks of Mars, the silent anchor points beyond Neptune, lights began to blaze. Aboard the flagship, which bore the name Unyielding, June now stood on the command bridge. He wore the simple black uniform of the fleet. Around him, the crew moved with quiet efficiency. At the engineering station was Day, his hands now scarred from a lifetime of taming violent stars. At the life support station was Hannah, her screens showing the vital, wild flow of the Europa-derived systems. All ships report ready, a comms officer said. Core ignition sequence is green. June took a final look at the main screen, which showed a view of Jupiter, a serene giant. This was the last sight of home for many of them. Signal the fleet, June said. Wildfire pattern. Light the dark. On 1,000 ships, engineers pulled physical levers or pressed glowing initiators. There was no gentle hum. Deep in the bellies of each vessel, the contained singularities of the Azura cores were agitated, fed, and unleashed. Space around the ships did not bend politely. It screamed. A violent, amber-red energy flared from the engine stacks. Not a sleek beam, but a churning, fiery plume. Like a piece of a star had been torn loose. It was power, but it was raw and hungry. The light painted the hulls of the asteroids in a hellish glow. The Unyielding shuddered, a deep, groaning vibration that went through the bones of the ship and the crew. On his screen, Day watched a dozen stress indicators flash yellow. Core is stable, but it's fighting the containment like a live thing, he reported, his voice tense. Understood, June said. He looked at Hannah. Her displays showed the ecosystem reacting to the surge, filters working overtime to scrub sudden spikes in radiation. One by one, the 1,000 ships began to move. They left behind no elegant warp bubbles. They tore their way into the deeper layers of space, their wakes a turbulent river of burning amber against the black. It was not a journey. It was an assault on the distance itself. From a distant probe, the sight was both terrible and beautiful. 1,000 trails of flame, like angry scars, slashing across the solar system and aiming for the void between stars. They were not a peaceful armada. They were a swarm of lit matches, thrown into the cosmic night, a flame for a battle they had chosen for the most human of reasons, because it was the right thing to do, and because no one else would. The journey was a trial by fire. Space for the Azura fleet was not an empty highway. It was a stormy ocean they had to punch through. The amber wakes of their engines left searing scars across the void, a visible testament to their brutal passage. Inside the Unyielding, the mood was tense and quiet. The constant, low-frequency groan of the Azura core was a sound you felt in your teeth. Crew members spoke in hushed tones, as if a loud noise might upset the unstable star burning at the heart of their ship. June spent most of his time on the bridge, staring at the fleet status display. 100 small red alerts blinked across the board. A coolant leak here, a harmonic vibration there. They were manageable. Until they weren't. On the 7th day of the transit, the alarm was different. It was a sharp, screaming klaxon that cut through the low rumble. Core breach. It's the Dauntless, the sensor officer shouted. June swung to the main viewer. The warship Dauntless, 3 positions off their port flank, was glowing like an angry ember. Its engine flare, usually a controlled torrent of amber, was flickering wildly between white and a sickly purple. Dauntless, this is unyielding. Cut your core. Emergency shutdown. June barked into the comm. The reply was cracked with static. Unyielding, containment failure. We can't. The voice was cut off on the screen. The Dauntless seemed to shiver. Then, the light at its heart swallowed it whole. There was no sound in the vacuum, but the bridge crew flinched as if from a thunderclap. A sphere of silent, white-hot energy expanded where the ship had been, vaporizing it utterly. Then it faded, leaving behind only a faint, glittering cloud of debris and the fading echo of its signal on the comms. The bridge was silent. 1,000 ships had become 999. 300 souls, gone in an instant. A reminder, their power had a price. It was not a neat, clean weapon. It was a barely controlled wildfire, and sometimes, fire burned the hand that held it. June closed his eyes for a moment. He saw faces from the old days on Earth. He did not let the grief sit. He turned it into cold data. Log the loss, he said, his voice gravelly. Have engineering analyze the burst pattern. I want to know if it was a flaw or an overload. All other ships, run level 2 diagnostics on your containment fields. Now, the order was carried out. The fleet flew on, a little quieter, a little more grim. The fiery wakes seemed less like banners of defiance and more like the trailing sparks of a rocket that might explode at any second. After 3 weeks of this tense travel, the navigation officer spoke up, her voice tight. Approaching the Vel Prime System translation point in 10 minutes. Gravimetric distortions are extreme. Bring us out of drive, but keep the cores hot, June ordered. Battle stations. Quietly. The groaning of the Azura core deepened as the Unyielding and its fleet began to slow, tearing themselves back into normal space. The starfield on the main viewer blurred, then snapped into focus. The sight stole the breath from the bridge. Vel Prime hung in space, a gray-blue marble streaked with clouds. But around it, the space was alive with a nightmare. The Gravian swarm was like a cloud of locusts made of ship and chitin. Their vessels were organic, asymmetrical, with bony protrusions and pulsing bioluminescent patches. They moved in a constant, swirling frenzy, like insects around a nest. And the nest was burning. The elegant, geometric defense platforms of the Vel were shattered ruins. The few remaining Vel warships, sleek, crystalline vessels designed for orderly warfare, were being surrounded and torn apart by the swarming Gravian. They fought with precise, logical patterns, firing calculated beams. The Gravians simply soaked up the losses and overwhelmed them with sheer, mindless numbers. It was like watching an orderly line of soldiers being consumed by a tidal wave of claws. A desperate signal washed over the general frequency. It was a Vel voice, strained and metallic. Any council vessels, fall back to the rally point. The swarm is consuming the outer orbitals. Do not attempt. The signal dissolved into a screech of static that sounded horrifyingly like a scream. Then, a new voice, on a different frequency. It was a Gravian broadcast translated by their computers. It was not words. It was a simple, repeating psychic pulse of hunger. Consume, devour, grow. For a moment, there was only the awful spectacle on the screen and the deep, angry thrum of their own engines. Then, a sharp, clear signal pinged on their dedicated channel. It was a Vel warship, its hull cracked and venting atmosphere. The face that appeared on June's screen was familiar. It was Kale. A century had etched deep lines into his stony features. One side of his face was scorched and cracked. Human vessels. Kale's voice was a broken version of its old, grinding tone. You must flee. This system is lost. The Gravian do not take prisoners. They do not accept surrender. They only consume. There is nothing for you here but death. Go. Your appearance is noted, but it is a gesture only. Leave. June looked at the face of the being who had condemned humanity to a century of darkness. He saw no arrogance there now, only a hollow, final despair. Kale believed he was offering a last scrap of mercy. June leaned forward, opening a fleet-wide channel. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of 100 years of silence and the roar of 999 burning engines. Vel Counselor Kale, June said, you once defined our emotion as a weakness. You said we were a fire that needed to be contained. On the screen, Kale's weary eyes showed confusion. June continued, his gaze fixed on the swirling horror around the planet. You were wrong. You mistook a hearth fire for a wildfire. A hearth fire warms, forges, it lights the dark. He paused, taking in the view of his bridge crew. Day with his hands steady over the core controls, Hannah monitoring the wild life signs of her systems, all of them waiting. Now, June said, his voice dropping to a command. Witness the wildfire. He switched to the internal fleet comm. His order was simple. Azura Fleet. Ignite the darkness. Battle pattern. Scorched earth. Engage. The Council's way of war was a dance. Precise formations, calculated energy discharges, logical feints and retreats. The Gravian way was a feeding frenzy. An overwhelming tide of teeth and claws. Humanity's way was something else entirely. It was chaos with a purpose. A wildfire. When June gave the order, the Azura fleet did not form a neat battle line. It shattered. The 1,000 fiery trails, which had moved as one spearhead, now exploded outward like the spray from a hammer hitting stone. Small, fast hunter-killer ships, their engines flaring, dove straight into the densest Gravian swarms, not to fight, but to lead. Tay, lead your squadron through the debris field near the fourth moon. June's voice was calm in young pilot Tay's ear. Get their attention. Lure the pursuit group into the canyon. Tay's hands were slick on the controls of his fighter, a sleek dart named Wisp. Behind him, a dozen organic Gravian skitter ships followed, drawn by his ship's heat and noise. He flew not with computer-perfect precision, but with instinct, jinking and rolling through the shattered hull of a Vel station, feeling the scrape of metal on his shields. He led the chasing swarm into a deep orbital trench littered with asteroid fragments. Now, June commanded. From behind the largest asteroids, 3 human cruisers emerged. They did not fire energy weapons. They unleashed volleys of crude, physical missiles, smart metal loaded with shrapnel and chemical explosives. In the vacuum, the detonations were silent, but the effect was not. The canyon filled with a storm of tearing metal. The Gravian swarm, packed tightly in pursuit, was shredded. They didn't understand an enemy who used the landscape itself as a weapon. On the bridge of the unyielding, Day watched his core monitors scream. The surge from that maneuver spiked the containment field to 98%. We can't keep this up. We don't have to keep it up long, June said, his eyes on the larger tactical map. Hannah, how are our guests holding? At her station, Hannah watched the bioscans of the ship's internal ecosystem, the engineered Europa microbes in the walls and air processors. The radiation spikes from their volatile engines stressed the system. Algae blooms died in seconds, only to be rapidly consumed and recycled by the tougher extremophile bacteria. It was a war inside the ship mirroring the one outside. It's ugly, but it's holding, she reported. The system is adapting, fighting back. That was the human strategy in a nutshell. Adapt. Fight back with whatever was at hand. The Gravian mother beast, a vast, pulsating living ship at the heart of the swarm, seemed to sense a new kind of threat. Pulsed a new order. The swarm shifted, abandoning its attacks on the remaining Vel ships to concentrate on the strange, fiery newcomers. A wave of Gravian vessels, 100 strong, surged toward the human flagship. June saw it coming. Pattern Phoenix, he ordered. The Unyielding and its direct escort ships turned and seemed to flee, their amber wakes bright. They led the Gravian wave toward the radiation-heavy nebula at the system's edge, a place the Vel ships avoided for its sensor-disrupting qualities. The Gravian, single-minded, followed. Inside the nebula's swirling gases, human sensor advantage vanished. But so did Gravian coordination. June's ships switched to short-range, chaotic close-quarters combat, using the nebulous clouds to hide, to ambush. A human destroyer, the Resolve, critically damaged, didn't try to limp away. Its captain broadcast a simple message. For Earth. Then he overloaded his Azura core. The silent, amber-white explosion in the colorful gas cloud vaporized 100 Gravian vessels in a terrible, beautiful flower of light. It was a sacrifice the logical Vel would never have made. It was a tactic the instinctive Gravian could not comprehend from his crippled bridge. Kale watched the sensor data, his stone face unable to show shock, but his body utterly still. He saw the humans fight with a desperate, improvisational fury. They used debris as cover. They baited traps with damaged ships. They fought like cornered animals, but animals with a terrifying, collective intelligence. They were not just containing the fire of their engines. They were wielding it as a blade, even if it burned them. Tay, back from his luring mission, was assigned to cover a fleeing Vel civilian transport. As he flew close, his cockpit lights glinted off the transport's viewport. Inside, he saw not alien monsters, but a Vel child, its large, dark eyes wide with fear, clutching a stony-handed parent. In that moment, the enemy became a person. The abstract Vel became a family. He banked hard, putting his wisp between the transport and a diving Gravian predator. He fired his railguns, punching holes through the organic hull. "Get them out of here!" he yelled to the transport. Though they couldn't hear him, the battle raged for hours. The human fleet was taking losses. Another ship, the Courage, vanished in a flash of purple light, its core destabilizing. But for every human ship lost, 10, 20 Gravian vessels were torn apart by the unpredictable, furious tactics. The swarm's advance on Vel Prime had halted. The feeding frenzy was now a confused, bloody brawl against an enemy that burned as brightly as a star and died just as loudly. The amber flames of human warships wove through the dark, cutting and burning the shadow of the Gravian swarm. They were not winning cleanly. They were winning by refusing to lose, by being a storm the galaxy had never seen before, a storm of heart and fire and sacrifice. The turning point did not come from a weapon. It came from a song. On Earth, in the deep mountain command center, Myri and her analysts had not been idle during the long voyage. They had studied every scrap of data from the Gravian Wars, every failed Council battle report from the past century. They found a pattern, hidden in the noise. The Gravian aren't just eating worlds. A young scientist named Sue had said, her eyes tired from staring at screens. They're drawn to specific quantum signatures. Their hive mind navigates by them. It's like a smell to them. The smell of what? Myri had asked. The smell of Vel hyperdrives and the old Council stabilizing fields. It's a clean, harmonic signal. To the Gravian, it's a dinner bell. Myri had looked at the schematics of their own ships, at the snarling, unstable heart of the Azura core. This quantum signature was not clean. It was a scream of discordant energy, a violent, chaotic pulse. Now, as the battle reached a fever pitch, Myri's message reached the Unyielding. June read it on his private screen, the words clear amid the chaos of the bridge. The Gravian mother beast is the nexus. It emits the guiding signal. Our cores emit painful discord to their senses. A synchronized pulse from the fleet may overload its perception. It is not a weapon. It is a noise, a very loud, very painful noise. June understood. They couldn't outbite the swarm. They had to confuse it, to blind it. New orders to the fleet, June said, his voice cutting through the damage reports.
Disengage offensive pattern.
Form resonance sphere around the Gravian mother beast. Synchronize your Azura core pulses to my mark. We are going to sing it a lullaby. It was a desperate, strange order. But the fleet, trained for unorthodoxy, obeyed. The fiery trails of the human ships stopped their chaotic dance. They pulled back, forming a wide, shimmering sphere around the vast, pulsating organic shape of the Gravian hive ship. The remaining Vel and Gravian ships continued to clash at the edges, but at the center, an eerie calm fell. All ships, ready core modulation, June commanded. On his screen, every captain confirmed. Day's hands flew over his panel, locking the unstable core into a specific, rhythmic frequency. Hannah watched her biological systems react to the new, thrumming pulse, the microbes in the walls seeming to vibrate in tune. On my mark, June said. He took a breath. 3, 2, 1. Sing. Across 900 ships, engineers pushed the controls. The Azura cores did not fire. Instead, they were forced into a shared, pulsing rhythm. The amber flames at their sterns did not vanish, but they began to pulse in unison. A slow, deep, throbbing beat. The sound did not travel through space, but the signature did. A wave of chaotic, painful quantum noise, amplified and synchronized, radiated out from the human sphere. It washed over the Gravian mother beast. The effect was immediate and violent. The huge organic ship convulsed. Its pulsing bioluminescence flared erratically, like a strobe light. The swirling Gravian swarm, at the edges of battle, suddenly lost coordination. Ships collided with each other. Their attacks became wild, unfocused. The guiding signal from their mother had been replaced by a wall of agonizing static. The mother beast, crippled and in psychic pain, began to move, not forward but away. It turned its monstrous bulk, retracting vast tendrils from the Vel orbitals. It pulsed a single, desperate command to the swarm. Retreat. Like a tide pulling back from a shore, the Gravian swarm broke. They disengaged, flowing back toward their wounded mother, forming a protective shell around it as it limped toward the system's edge and vanished into a jerky, unstable jump. The silence that followed was heavy and strange. The space around Vel Prime was littered with debris, crystalline shards of Vel ships, organic chunks of Gravian vessels, and the twisted, scorched metal of human hulls. The amber pulses of the human fleet slowed, then returned to their normal, fiery idle. They hung in the dark, battered and burning, but alive. A communication request chimed on June's console. He accepted it. Kale's face appeared. The Vel counselor looked ancient, his stone features etched with cracks of shame and awe. He looked past June, at the battered but steady bridge of the human ship. He saw the tired but unbroken faces of the crew. Why? Kale's voice was a rough whisper. After all we did, after the abandonment, why would you come? Why would you die for us? June did not answer immediately. He looked at Hannah, who gave a small, exhausted nod. He looked at Day, who managed a grim, soot-stained smile. He thought of Myri, waiting on a world that had been left in the dark. We didn't, June said finally, his voice clear. You abandoned us for being human. You called our heart a flaw. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed on Kale's image. We returned because of it. We did not come for the council. We did not come for you. We came to prove to ourselves that our humanity was not a weakness to be erased. He paused, letting the words hang in the quiet. It is a fire, and a fire can warm a hearth, or it can burn a forest. You taught us how to burn. Today we chose to warm. He saw the understanding, and the profound humiliation, dawn in Kale's eyes. The alliance we offer now, June continued, will be on new terms, not as supplicants, not as wards, as equals, or not at all. The choice is yours. He closed the channel. The bridge was quiet. On the main viewer, the image shifted. It showed a close-up feed from the surface of Vel Prime. Amid the gray ruins of a shattered city, a human medical shuttle had landed. A human medic in a simple uniform was kneeling next to a wounded Vel child, applying a gel bandage to its cracked stone-like skin. The amber light from a hovering human warship, its engines still aflame, bathed them both in a warm, defiant glow. Down on the surface, the Vel child had stopped crying. It was staring up, not at the medic, but at the sky, at the 1,000 points of amber fire that had torn the darkness apart. It was a light unlike any the galaxy had seen before. It was the light of a hearth fire, burning in the cold of space, promising that the long night was finally over.